It's not just about money, Brielle. We're not happy. You know we're not. Bringing a child into this situation wouldn't be fair to anyone.
Garrison Wells never believed in love at first sight until he met Brielle Montgomery at a community art gallery in downtown Portland on a rainy October evening. She stood before a vibrant abstract painting, her natural curls catching the soft gallery lights, her brown eyes studying the artwork with an intensity that made him forget why he'd even come to the exhibition. He was a corporate attorney, always dressed in sharp suits, always calculating his next move. She was a middle school art teacher with paint-stained fingers and a laugh that could fill an entire room. Their love story began like something out of a movie. Garrison, usually reserved and methodical, found himself stumbling over his words as he approached her. "I think the artist was trying to capture the chaos of hope," he said, immediately regretting how pretentious he sounded. Brielle turned to him, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Or maybe it's just random paint splatters that we're overthinking," she replied, her eyes twinkling with humor. That night, they talked until the gallery closed, then continued their conversation at a nearby coffee shop until midnight. Garrison learned that Brielle had grown up in South Seattle, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to put her through college. She spoke passionately about her students, about giving kids from underserved communities the same opportunities she'd fought for. He told her about his childhood in suburban Spokane, about the pressure from his father to join the family law firm, about how he'd always followed the path expected of him. "Maybe it's time you chose your own path," Brielle had said, her hand accidentally brushing his across the table, sending electricity through both of them. They were married 18 months later in a beautiful ceremony that blended both their worlds. Brielle's family brought soul food, music and joy that made Garrison's typically reserved relatives actually get up and dance. His mother, Patricia, had initially been concerned about the relationship, a concern that barely masked her discomfort with her son marrying a black woman. But Brielle's warmth and grace eventually won over everyone, or so it seemed. The first 3 years of marriage were beautiful. They bought a modest house in a diverse neighborhood, created a home filled with Brielle's artwork and Garrison's collection of vintage books. They talked about children, about the family they'd build together, about raising kids who would be proud of both their heritages. But somewhere around year 4, cracks began to appear. Welcome to Mr. Roman's Story Vault, where every story carries a lesson that could change your life. If you believe in stories that inspire transformation, hit that subscribe button right now. And don't forget to hit the like button if you've ever had to choose between giving someone a second chance or protecting your peace. Now, let's dive in. Garrison made partner at his firm, and with that promotion came longer hours, bigger cases, and mounting pressure. He started missing dinners, then date nights, then entire weekends. Brielle threw herself into her teaching, starting an after-school art program that demanded more of her time and emotional energy. They began living parallel lives under the same roof. The real problems started when Brielle brought up children again. She was 32, Garrison was 35, and they'd always said they'd start a family before she turned 33. But now, Garrison hesitated. "Maybe we should wait," he said one night, not looking up from his laptop. "I'm up for the Carmichael case, and it's going to be intense for the next year." "You said that about the Patterson case," Brielle responded quietly. "And before that, the Henderson merger. This is different. This is my career, Brielle. I thought you understood that, and I thought we were building a life together. Not just careers." The arguments became more frequent. Garrison's mother, Patricia, didn't help matters. During family dinners, she'd make subtle comments about how demanding children were, how they changed everything, how maybe Garrison and Brielle should enjoy their freedom a while longer. Brielle saw through the coded language. Patricia didn't want mixed-race grandchildren, didn't want her social circle knowing her son had chosen a black woman to mother his children. Garrison, caught between his mother's passive-aggressive commentary and his wife's growing frustration, did what he'd always done. He buried himself in work and avoided the conflict. Then, on their 5th anniversary in late April, everything changed. Brielle had planned a special dinner, bought a new dress, and had news that terrified and excited her in equal measure. She'd taken 3 pregnancy tests that week, and all 3 showed the same result: positive. She hadn't planned it, but she wasn't preventing it either. They'd stopped using protection months ago during one of their rare intimate moments. And Brielle had taken it as a sign that maybe Garrison was ready, even if he hadn't said so. She set the table with candles, spring flowers from their garden, made his favorite meal, and waited. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8. By 9:30, she was blowing out the candles. At 10:45, Garrison walked in, exhausted and distracted. "Sorry, the deposition ran late," he mumbled, loosening his tie. "We had plans, Garrison. It's our anniversary." He looked genuinely surprised, then guilty. "God, Brielle, I'm so sorry. I've just been so overwhelmed with—" "I'm pregnant," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Garrison stood frozen in the doorway, his briefcase still in his hand. The expression on his face wasn't joy or excitement, it was fear, maybe even panic. "What?" he finally said. "I'm pregnant. About 6 weeks. How did this happen?" The question stung. "How do you think it happened, Garrison? I mean, we agreed to wait. We talked about this." "No, you said to wait. You've been saying to wait for 2 years. I thought maybe you'd changed your mind that night after your firm. Escala, when we actually connected for the first time in months." Garrison set down his briefcase and ran his hands through his hair. "This isn't a good time. The Carmichael case is about to go to trial. I'm working 80-hour weeks, and we're barely holding it together as is. So what are you saying?" He looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something that broke her heart. "Maybe we should consider our options." "Options?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm just saying we're not in a good place right now. Financially, emotionally. We're fine financially. You make plenty of money. It's not just about money, Brielle. We're not happy. You know we're not. Bringing a child into this situation wouldn't be fair to anyone." The words hung in the air between them like poison. Brielle felt tears streaming down her face, but she held her ground. "This is our child, Garrison. Our baby. It's a cluster of cells right now. We have time to make a rational decision." The clinical way he spoke about their child, about her child, made something inside Brielle shut down. She saw clearly in that moment who Garrison had become, or maybe who he'd always been beneath the charm and the initial passion. He was his father's son, practical and cold, making calculated decisions based on convenience rather than love. The next 3 weeks were torture. Garrison tried to be supportive, but Brielle could see the burden in his eyes every time he looked at her. He brought home pamphlets about pregnancy options, left his laptop open to articles about timing and family planning, and kept emphasizing that whatever she decided, he'd support her. But he never once said he wanted the baby. His mother made things worse. When they told her, Patricia's face went pale. "Oh my," she said, fanning herself dramatically. "Well, that's certainly unexpected. Are you sure you're ready for this, Garrison? You're at such a critical point in your career." She didn't even address Brielle. The final straw came at a family dinner at Patricia's house. Garrison's sister, Mallory, was there with her husband and 2 blonde-haired children. Patricia doted on them throughout the meal, then turned to Garrison with calculated concern. "You know, dear, I read an article about maternal stress and pregnancy outcomes. Given how strained things seem between you and Brielle, perhaps this isn't the right time to move forward with everything." Brielle stood up from the table. "Excuse me, I need some air." She walked out to the garden, tears blurring her vision. She heard footsteps behind her and assumed it was Garrison. But it was Mallory. "I'm sorry about my mother," Mallory said quietly. She has her views." "You mean she doesn't want black grandchildren?" Brielle said bluntly. Mallory didn't deny it. She grew up in a different time, but that doesn't excuse it. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be an amazing mother. Does your brother think that?" Mallory hesitated. "Garrison is scared. He's always done what Dad and Mom expected. This is probably the first time in his life where there's no clear playbook." "I'm scared too," Brielle admitted. "But I want this baby. I just wish he did. When they drove home that night in silence, Brielle made a decision. She couldn't raise a child with a man who saw them as an inconvenience, who couldn't stand up to his mother, who valued his career trajectory over their family. I want a divorce, she said, as Garrison pulled into their driveway. He turned to her, shocked. What? You heard me. This isn't working. We both know it, and I won't raise my child in a home where they're not wanted. Brielle, let's talk about this. We've talked enough. You've made your feelings clear. You don't want this baby, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to be married to someone who could look at our child as a problem to be solved. The divorce proceedings were swift and bitter. Garrison's lawyer, one of his colleagues at the firm, was efficient and ruthless. During one particularly awful mediation session, Garrison's attorney asked directly, "Is Ms. Montgomery still pregnant?" Brielle looked at Garrison, waiting for him to defend her, to show some emotion. He just stared at the table. "That's none of your business," her attorney responded. But the question haunted her. She was barely 8 weeks by then, her secret still hidden under loose clothing. The stress of the divorce had her barely eating, barely sleeping. She'd lost weight instead of gaining it, and her doctor had expressed concern. 2 weeks before the divorce was finalized, which was being rushed through at Garrison's lawyer's insistence, Brielle had her worst argument with Garrison yet. They were dividing assets at the house, and he'd asked, almost casually, "Did you schedule the appointment?" "What appointment?" "You know what I mean, Brielle. Did you take care of things?" The casual cruelty of it broke something in her. "Get out," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Get out of my house. It's still technically my house too. Get out." He left, and that was the last real conversation they had. The divorce was finalized through lawyers and paperwork. Garrison kept the house. Brielle didn't want to stay in a place filled with broken dreams. She took her settlement, less than she deserved, but she was too exhausted to fight, and moved to a small apartment across town. During the final paperwork signing, Garrison had said quietly, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry things ended this way." Brielle had looked at him, this man she'd once loved with her whole heart, and felt nothing but emptiness. "Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you got exactly what you wanted. Your career, your freedom, no complications. Did you?" He couldn't even finish the question. She'd signed the papers without answering and walked out of his life. Garrison threw himself into work with even more intensity after the divorce. The Carmichael case went to trial, and he won, securing the biggest victory of his career. He was celebrated at the firm, given a bonus, put on track for senior partner. But the victory felt hollow. He'd moved back into the house, but it felt like a mausoleum. Brielle's artwork was gone from the walls, her books removed from the shelves, her presence erased from every room. He'd wake up reaching for her and find empty space. He told himself he'd made the right choice. They'd been unhappy, heading for divorce anyway. The pregnancy had just accelerated the inevitable, and she'd clearly taken care of things. She'd never mentioned the baby again after that last fight, never asked for child support, never reached out at all. He assumed she'd gotten an abortion, just as he'd suggested. A part of him felt relief. Another part felt a guilt so profound he couldn't examine it too closely. His mother was pleased with the divorce, of course. "You're better off, dear," Patricia said. "Now you can find someone more suitable." For the first time in his life, Garrison had snapped at her. "Don't, Mum. Just don't." He didn't date, didn't socialize, just worked. His colleagues worried about him. His sister called regularly, but he rarely answered. He was functioning, successful even, but not truly alive. Meanwhile, across town, Brielle was building a new life. The pregnancy progressed despite the stress. Her doctor monitored her closely, and slowly, her body began to change in ways she couldn't hide. She took a leave of absence from teaching, telling her principal she needed time to heal from the divorce. Her mother, Diane, had been her rock. When Brielle finally told her about the baby at 16 weeks, Diane had held her daughter and cried tears of joy mixed with sadness. "Baby girl, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Diane asked. "Because I was scared," Brielle admitted. Scared that I'd made a mistake. Scared that I couldn't do this alone. Scared that maybe Garrison was right and it was a terrible time. "Don't you let that man make you doubt yourself," Diane said firmly. "You are strong. We are strong. The Montgomery women have been raising babies on our own for generations when we had to. You've got this, and you've got me." Brielle's best friend, Kendra, was equally supportive. She threw Brielle a small baby shower, helped her set up the nursery in her tiny apartment, and went to every doctor's appointment Garrison should have attended. As Brielle's belly grew, so did her sense of purpose. This baby, her daughter, yes, she was having a girl, became her North Star. She read parenting books, took prenatal yoga, prepared herself mentally and emotionally for single motherhood. She named her daughter Lyric because music and rhythm and finding your own melody in life mattered. Brielle intentionally avoided places she might run into Garrison. She shopped in different neighborhoods, stayed away from downtown, lived quietly. She didn't want his money, didn't want his guilt, didn't want anything from him. If he didn't want them, she'd build a life where they didn't need him. But she'd be lying if she said she didn't think about him. Late at night, when Lyric would kick and move, Brielle would place her hand on her belly and wonder if Garrison ever thought about them, if he felt any regret, if he imagined what their daughter might look like. She'd quickly push those thoughts away. That door was closed. Garrison had made his choice. 7 months after the divorce was finalized, Garrison's carefully constructed emotional walls began to crack. It started small, a song on the radio that reminded him of Brielle, a couple laughing in a coffee shop the way he and Brielle used to laugh, a child's artwork in a store window that looked like something Brielle would have created with her students. His sister Mallory confronted him one Sunday afternoon. "You need to talk to someone," she said. "You're miserable, Garrison. Anyone can see it." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You got everything you said you wanted, the career success, the freedom, and you're more lost than I've ever seen you." "What do you want me to say, Mallory?" "I want you to admit that you made a mistake, that letting Brielle go was the biggest mistake of your life." He couldn't, not out loud, but he knew she was right. That's when he decided to try to find Brielle, just to see if she was okay, maybe to apologize properly. He drove by the house they'd shared, but a different family lived there now. He called her old school, but they said she was on extended leave. He even tried her mother's number, but it had been disconnected. Then, on a Saturday afternoon in late June, Garrison went to the farmer's market downtown, something he never did. But Mallory had dragged him out of the house, insisting he needed sunlight and fresh air. And that's when he saw her. Brielle was at a produce stand, examining strawberries, laughing at something the vendor said. She wore a flowing sundress in shades of yellow and orange that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Her natural curls were pulled back with a colorful scarf, and she looked radiant, more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. And she was very, very pregnant. Garrison stopped walking so abruptly that Mallory bumped into him. "What's wrong?" she asked, then followed his gaze. Oh my God. The world seemed to move in slow motion. Brielle turned, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, and her eyes met his across the crowded market. The smile dropped from her face. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the 7 months of silence stretching between them like a canyon. Garrison's mind was reeling. She was pregnant, still pregnant, very pregnant. Which meant, his brain did the math quickly. This was the same pregnancy, their baby. She'd never had an abortion. She'd been carrying their child this entire time, and he'd abandoned her. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees actually went weak, and Mallory had to grab his arm to steady him. "Garrison," Mallory whispered urgently. "Is that—" But Garrison was already moving forward, pushing through the crowd, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Brielle!" She looked like she was considering running, her eyes wide with something between fear and anger. But she was too far along to move quickly, and he closed the distance between them before she could decide. "Brielle," he said again, breathless, staring at her belly, at the clear evidence of his colossal failure. You're still pregnant?" She finished, her voice cold. Yes, Garrison, I'm pregnant. Did you think I'd just… what? Make that decision because it was convenient for you? I thought… You never said anything. You never asked for support or… You made it very clear what you thought I should do, she cut him off. And I decided that what I did with my body and my baby was none of your concern. Our baby, he said quietly. It's our baby, Brielle. Her eyes flashed with anger. No, you gave up that right when you handed me abortion clinic pamphlets and asked if I'd taken care of things. This is my daughter. Mine, a daughter. He was going to have a daughter. The reality of it crashed over him in waves. Pause here for just a moment, because I need to know, what would you do if you were Garrison in this moment? Would you fight for a second chance, or would you accept that some mistakes can't be fixed? Drop your answer in the comments right now, and while you're down there, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to take some turns you won't see coming. And if you're feeling this story, if Brielle's pain is hitting you in your chest, or if you angry at Garrison for what he did, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the stories that hurt us are the ones we need most. Now, let's see if Brielle gives him the chance he doesn't deserve. Brielle, please. Can we talk? We did talk, Garrison. 7 months ago. And you made your position very clear. I was wrong, he said, the words bursting out of him. I was so incredibly wrong about everything. People were starting to stare. Mallory had caught up and gently touched Brielle's arm. Brielle, I know you have no reason to hear him out, but maybe not here. Could we go somewhere quieter? Brielle looked at Mallory, then back at Garrison, her hand still protectively cradling her belly. For a moment, Garrison thought she'd refuse. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire past year, she nodded. Fine. There's a park 2 blocks from here. But I'm not promising anything, Garrison. I'm only doing this so you don't cause a scene. They walked to the park in tense silence. Brielle moved slowly, carefully, and Garrison found himself instinctively reaching out to help her navigate the curb, only to have her pull away from his touch. Once they were seated on a bench under a large oak tree, Mallory wisely giving them space. But staying within view, Garrison tried to find the words he should have said months ago. I'm sorry, he started. Those words aren't enough. I know they're not, but I need to say them. I'm so incredibly sorry, Brielle. She didn't respond, just watched him with those beautiful brown eyes that now held a wariness that broke his heart. I was a coward, he continued. I was scared and selfish, and I prioritized all the wrong things. My career, my mother's approval, my own comfort. I put all of that ahead of you, ahead of our marriage, ahead of our child. Why now? Brielle asked quietly. Why are you saying this now, Garrison? Because you saw me pregnant? Because now it's real to you? He struggled with the answer because she was partly right. Seeing you today was a shock, he admitted. I assumed you'd had an abortion, and I hated myself for being relieved about it, but I told myself it was, for the best, that we were too broken to bring a child into our mess. We were broken because you broke us, Brielle said, her voice steady but her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I would have fought for our marriage, Garrison. Even when things got hard, I would have fought. But you gave up. You chose your career and your mother's approval over us. I know, you're right. And I've spent the last 7 months being absolutely miserable, realizing that every choice I made was wrong. I won the Carmichael case, biggest win of my career. And all I could think was that you weren't there to celebrate with me. I got promoted to senior partner track. Empty. Everything is empty without you. Brielle shook her head. You don't get to do this, Garrison. You don't get to show up now and expect me to believe you've changed because you're lonely. Do you have any idea what these past 7 months have been like for me? Tell me, he said desperately. Please, tell me. And slowly, haltingly, she did. She told him about the fear and the morning sickness that lasted all day, about lying awake at night, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake trying to do this alone, about her mother stepping up, about Kendra being her rock, about finding strength she didn't know she had. I felt her kick for the first time at 18 weeks, Brielle said, fresh tears rolling down her face. And you should have been there, Garrison. I wanted you there so badly it physically hurt. But you'd made it clear you didn't want this, didn't want her, so I had to let you go. I did want her, Garrison said, his own voice breaking. I was just too scared to admit it. Too afraid I'd fail, that I'd be a terrible father, that I'd mess everything up. So instead you chose to abandon us before you could fail. How is that better? He had no answer to that, because there wasn't one. It's not. It's not better. It's the worst thing I've ever done. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching children play in the distance. The sound of laughter and life continuing around them while their world hung in balance. Finally, Brielle spoke. What do you want, Garrison? Why are you really here? I want a chance to make this right, he said. I want to be a father to our daughter. I want to support you, to be there for you, to... Stop, she held up her hand. Let's be very clear about something. Even if, and this is a huge if, I allow you to be part of Lyric's life, that doesn't mean we're getting back together. That doesn't fix our marriage. That ship has sailed. Lyric? He asked softly. That's her name. Lyric Montgomery. Not Lyric Wells, not Lyric Wells Montgomery. Just Lyric Montgomery. The fact that his daughter wouldn't carry his name stung, but he had no right to object. It's beautiful. The name. It's beautiful. You can't just waltz back in because you're having regrets, Brielle continued. If you want to be part of her life, you're going to have to prove yourself. Not with words, Garrison. With actions. Consistent, reliable actions over time. I'll do anything, he said immediately. Whatever you need. Whatever she needs. Brielle studied him for a long moment, her hand absently rubbing her belly. I have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday. A specialist appointment because I'm considered high risk given the stress of the past months. If you're serious about this, you can meet me there. 3 o'clock at Portland Women's Health Center. I'll be there, he said quickly. And Garrison, if you miss this appointment, if you let me down even once, you won't get another chance. I won't let you break my daughter's heart the way you broke mine. He nodded, understanding the gravity of what she was offering. I won't let you down, either of you. Not again. Tuesday came, and Garrison showed up 45 minutes early to the doctor's office, pacing the waiting room like an expectant father, which he supposed he was. When Brielle arrived with her mother, Diane, he stood immediately. Diane gave him a look that could freeze fire. You have some nerve showing up here, she said coldly. Mom, it's okay, Brielle said softly. I invited him. Baby, you sure about this? Because I can make him disappear real quick, Diane said, only half joking. Despite everything, Brielle smiled slightly. I'm sure, Mama. Will you wait out here? I'll be right here if you need me, Diane said, giving Garrison one more warning look before sitting down. The ultrasound was the most profound experience of Garrison's life. Seeing his daughter on the screen, watching her move, hearing her heartbeat. It made everything real in a way his imagination couldn't have prepared him for. She's perfect, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Brielle watched his face rather than the screen. She'd seen Lyric dozens of times in ultrasounds already. What she was looking for was whether Garrison's emotion was real or performative. What she saw in his eyes, the wonder, the tears, the instant love, looked genuine. But she'd been fooled before. After the appointment, they sat in the parking lot and talked. Garrison asked questions about Brielle's health, about what she needed, about the birth plan. He offered financial support, which Brielle reluctantly accepted, not for herself but for Lyric. I don't want your money out of guilt, she said clearly, but I won't let pride stop me from accepting support for my daughter, so we'll set up something official, through lawyers. Child support appropriate to your income. I want to be more than a check, Brielle. That's not for me to decide. That's for you to prove and for Lyric to decide as she grows up. Over the following weeks, Garrison showed up. Not perfectly. He was still learning, still making mistakes, but he was present. He came to the next doctor's appointment, and the one after that. He asked if he could help set up the nursery, and spent a Saturday building. A crib and changing table while Brielle directed from a chair, her feet up. It was awkward and sometimes painful. They weren't a couple anymore, and the wounds from their divorce were still fresh. But slowly, carefully, they were building something new. Not a romance, but a partnership focused on their daughter. Garrison also started making other changes. He set boundaries at work, actually leaving at reasonable hours. He attended therapy, working through his issues with conflict avoidance and his unhealthy relationship with his mother's approval. Speaking of his mother, that confrontation was inevitable. When Patricia learned that Brielle was pregnant and that Garrison was planning to be involved, she invited him to lunch, her version of a summons. "I hope you're not considering anything foolish," Patricia said over her salad. "That woman trapped you with a pregnancy, then had the audacity to divorce you, and now she's using the child to manipulate you." For the first time in his life, Garrison stood up to his mother completely. "Stop," he said firmly. "Brielle didn't trap me. She got pregnant with a child we both created, a child I told her to abort. She divorced me because I was a terrible husband who chose his career and his mother's approval over his wife, and she's not manipulating me. She's being generous enough to let me be part of my daughter's life, even though I have no right to ask for that." Patricia's face went red. "How dare you speak to me?" "I'm not finished," Garrison continued. "I'm going to be a father in about 6 weeks. My daughter is half black, and she's going to be beautiful and perfect. If you can't accept her, if you can't love her unconditionally, then you won't be part of her life. Or mine. Garrison, you're being ridiculous. I'm being a father, finally, and I'm choosing my daughter over your prejudice. Those are your options, Mom. Accept Brielle and Lyric with open arms and genuine love, or don't be part of our lives. Think carefully about what you choose." He left Patricia sitting at the table, shocked into silence for perhaps the first time in her life. Lyric, Diane Montgomery, came into the world on a humid August evening, 3 days before her due date. Garrison got the call from Diane. Brielle was in labor and had agreed to let him be at the hospital. He broke every speed limit getting there. Labor was long and difficult. Brielle's blood pressure spiked, and there was talk of an emergency C-section. Garrison sat in the waiting room with Diane and Kendra, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore, making promises about the father he'd be if both Brielle and Lyric came through this safely. After 14 hours, a nurse came out with a tired smile. "Both mama and baby are doing fine. It's a girl, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, and absolutely perfect. Miss Montgomery is asking for—" She checked her notes. "Mr. Wells?" Garrison stood so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. Brielle looked exhausted, her hair matted with sweat, her eyes heavy, but she was smiling as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in pink blankets. When she saw Garrison, she gestured him closer. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Garrison approached slowly, reverently, barely breathing. When Brielle shifted the blanket so he could see Lyric's face, his knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the bedrail to steady himself. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Perfect brown skin, a cap of dark curls, tiny fingers that gripped the blanket. And when she opened her eyes, dark and unfocused but searching, he felt his heart crack open in a way it never had before. "Can I?" he asked, his voice breaking. Brielle nodded and carefully transferred Lyric into his arms. The weight of her, the warmth, the tiny sounds she made. It destroyed and rebuilt Garrison in a single moment. "Hi, Lyric," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your daddy, and I'm so sorry I wasn't there before. But I promise you, I promise on everything I am, I will be there for you. From now on, I will love you and protect you and do everything in my power to be the father you deserve." Brielle watched this, her own tears falling. She'd hardened her heart against Garrison, built walls to protect herself. But watching him hold their daughter, seeing the genuine love and commitment in his eyes, she felt those walls crack just slightly. "She looks like you," Garrison said, looking up at Brielle. "She has your nose, your mouth. She has your stubbornness," Brielle replied with a tired smile. She didn't want to come out. held on until she was good and ready. Over the next couple of days in the hospital, Garrison barely left. He learned how to change diapers, how to swaddle, how to support Brielle as she navigated breastfeeding. Diane watched this transformation with guarded approval, while Kendra whispered to Brielle, "Girl, he's really showing up." "It's been a week," Brielle reminded her. "Let's see if it lasts." But it did last. Garrison reorganized his entire life around being present. He took paternity leave from the firm, something partners rarely did, and showed up at Brielle's apartment every day to help. It wasn't romantic. Brielle was clear about boundaries. He slept on her couch when he stayed late helping with night feedings, but never in her bed. They were Kyo parents, not a couple. But slowly, over the late-night feedings and the early morning diaper changes, over the pediatrician appointments, and the moments of sheer terror when Lyric ran a fever at 3 weeks old, they began to rebuild something. Trust came slowly. Friendship emerged carefully. And underneath it all, the love that had never really died began to cautiously bloom again. Garrison proved himself in small, consistent ways. He remembered Brielle's favorite coffee order and brought it when he came over. He noticed when she was overwhelmed and would take Lyric for a walk so Brielle could shower or nap. He listened when she talked about her fears, her postpartum struggles, her worries about being a good mother. "You're an amazing mother," he told her one night when Lyric was about 2 months old. They were both exhausted, sitting on opposite ends of Brielle's couch while Lyric slept in her bassinet nearby. "Watching you with her. I'm in awe of you, Brielle. I always have been, but now even more." Brielle looked at him carefully. "We're not doing this, Garrison." "Doing what?" "Getting swept up in the baby bubble and forgetting why we got divorced in the first place." "I haven't forgotten," he said seriously. "I think about it every day, about how badly I failed you, how I let my fear and my mother's influence destroy the best thing in my life." Past tense. "Your mother's still calling you every week trying to get you to reconsider this arrangement." Garrison smiled slightly. "Actually, she's been better lately. I think she realized I was serious about cutting her off if she couldn't accept Lyric. She's asked to meet her granddaughter." Brielle's expression hardened. "Absolutely not." "I told her the same thing," Garrison said quickly. "I said she'd need to prove herself to me first before I'd even consider introducing her to Lyric, and that if she ever made you or our daughter feel less than because of her prejudice, she'd never see any of us again." "And what did she say to that?" "She's in therapy," Garrison said. "Apparently, Mallory staged an intervention of sorts, told Mom that her racism and controlling behavior were about to cost her both her children and any future grandchildren. I don't know if Mom will truly change, but at least she's trying." Brielle didn't respond, just watched Lyric sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Garrison said softly. "I know I don't deserve that, but I want you to know that I'm not the same man who walked away from you. Lyric changed me. You changed me. Or maybe you both helped me finally become who I should have been all along. People don't change that much, that fast," Brielle said, but her voice was uncertain. "Maybe not. But they can choose differently. They can commit to being better, doing better. That's what I'm trying to do." When Lyric was 4 months old, Brielle had to admit something to herself. She was falling in love with Garrison again. Or maybe she'd never stopped loving him. Maybe she'd just buried it under hurt and anger and self-protection. She saw it in moments, the way he sang to Lyric in a slightly off-key voice that made their daughter smile. The way he'd researched black hair care so he could properly maintain Lyric's curls. The way he talked to Lyric constantly, telling her about his day, reading to her from board books, narrating every diaper change. "We're going to master the art of the onesie snap, Lyric," he'd say seriously. "Daddy's getting better at this." Only 3 attempts this time instead of 5. But more than that, she saw how he treated her. With respect, with patience, with a humility that hadn't existed before. He asked her opinion, deferred to her as Lyric's mother, supported her decisions even when they weren't what he would have chosen. When she'd decided to go back to teaching part-time, he'd helped her find a quality daycare near her school, offered to adjust his schedule so he could do pickups and drop-offs. When she'd broken down crying one day because her body didn't look the way it used to, and she felt frumpy and unattractive, he'd looked at her with such genuine confusion. "Brielle, you're beautiful," he'd said. "You created life. Your body grew our daughter, brought her into this world. Every change, every stretch mark, every pound, it's all evidence of the miracle you performed. How could you be anything but gorgeous?" She'd cried harder, and he'd held her carefully, platonically, just offering comfort with no ulterior motive. That's when she knew she was in trouble. Kendra noticed the shift. "Girl, you're falling for him again," she said during one of their regular coffee dates. "I know," Brielle admitted, "and I'm terrified." "Why?" "He's clearly changed. He's showing up, he's present, he's proving himself. But what if it doesn't last? What if this is just the honeymoon phase of fatherhood, and eventually he reverts back to the workaholic who chose his career over us? Then you'll deal with it," Kendra said, pragmatically. "But Brie, you can't live your life protecting yourself from maybes. Look at what's actually happening, not what you're afraid might happen." What was actually happening was that Garrison had become her best friend again. They talked about everything: politics, parenting philosophies, their fears and hopes for Lyric's future. They laughed together over Lyric's funny faces and her baby babble. They supported each other through the hard days. And one night, when Lyric was almost 5 months old, everything shifted. Garrison had stayed late helping with a particularly fussy evening. Lyric had finally fallen asleep on his chest, and he'd carefully transferred her to her crib. When he came back to the living room, he found Brielle staring out the window, her arms wrapped around herself. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I'm scared," she admitted without turning around. "Of what?" "Of this. Of us. Of feeling things I shouldn't feel." He moved closer, but didn't touch her. "What are you feeling?" She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw everything: the love, the fear, the hope, the pain. "I'm feeling like I want to give us another chance, and I'm terrified that's the biggest mistake I could make." Garrison's breath caught. "Brielle, I love you," she said, the words tumbling out. "I never stopped, as much as I tried to, and I love the father you've become, the man you're choosing to be, but I can't go through that again, Garrison. I can't survive you leaving again." "I won't," he said immediately, stepping closer. "Brielle, I swear to you." "You can't promise that," she interrupted. "Life happens. Things get hard. You can't promise you won't get scared or overwhelmed or tempted to fall back into old patterns." "You're right," he said, surprising her. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes. I'm sure I will. But I can promise that I won't run. I can promise that when things get hard, I'll fight for us instead of retreating into work. I can promise that you and Lyric will always, always be my priority." "How can you know that?" "Because losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "And finding you again, being given this second chance, I'm not stupid enough to waste it. I spent 7 months without you, Brielle. 7 months being successful and miserable. I know the difference now between what matters and what doesn't." She searched his face, looking for the lie, the doubt, the weakness that had destroyed them before. But all she saw was certainty and love. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted. "I'm terrified I'll mess this up somehow, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone." "If we do this," Brielle said slowly, "we do it right. We go to couples counseling. We communicate even when it's hard. We put Lyric first, but don't forget about us. And at the first sign that you're falling back into old habits, you call me on it, and I fix it," Garrison finished. "I'm already in therapy, Brielle. I've been working on my issues with conflict avoidance, with prioritizing work, with letting my mother influence my decisions. I want to be better for you, for Lyric, for myself." Brielle took a shaky breath. Okay. Let's try, slowly, carefully. But let's try." The kiss that followed was soft and sweet and tasted like tears and hope. It wasn't the passionate, consuming kiss of their early relationship. It was something deeper, a kiss that acknowledged pain and promised healing, that understood brokenness and chose love anyway. Over the next year, Garrison and Brielle rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of honesty, vulnerability, and hard work. They went to couples counseling every week, learning to communicate their needs and fears rather than letting resentment build. There were setbacks. Garrison had moments where he slipped into workaholic patterns, and Brielle had to remind him of his priorities. Brielle had moments where past hurts made her pull away, and Garrison had to patiently prove himself again. Patricia did eventually meet Lyric, and while she'd never be warm and fuzzy, she made genuine efforts to accept her granddaughter. The first time she held Lyric, she'd looked at the baby with wonder and said softly, "She's beautiful, Garrison. Truly beautiful." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Brielle's mother, Diane, was slower to trust Garrison. "You break my daughter's heart again, and they'll never find your body," she told him cheerfully one Sunday dinner. But over time, seeing his consistency, his devotion to both Brielle and Lyric, even Diane softened. On a quiet evening when Lyric was 18 months old, after putting their daughter to bed, Garrison proposed again. Not at a party, not with fanfare, but in the intimate space of the life they'd rebuilt together. Not with a grand gesture or expensive ring, but quietly, during a moment when it was just the three of them in Brielle's apartment, the same apartment she'd moved to when their marriage fell apart. "I know we're already working our way back," he said, Lyric balanced on his hip, playing with his collar. "But I want to make it official. I want to be your husband again, Brielle. I want Lyric to grow up seeing her parents love each other, support each other, choose each other every day." "You hurt me," Brielle said, "because honesty was their foundation now. You walked away when I needed you most." "I did," he agreed. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving that was the scared decision of a man who didn't understand what mattered. I'm not that man anymore." "No," Brielle agreed, taking Lyric from him and settling their daughter on her own hip. "You're not. You're the man who shows up, who changes diapers at 3 a.m., who researches the best schools in diverse neighborhoods, who stands up to his mother, who goes to therapy, who loves us enough to do the work. Is that a yes?" She smiled, that brilliant smile that had captured his heart in an art gallery years ago. "It's a yes, but we're doing this differently. We're planning a wedding together, not rushing into it. We're starting marriage counseling before the wedding, not after things fall apart. And we're writing our own vows that actually reflect who we are and what we've been through." "Deal," he said, pulling her and Lyric into his arms. "Anything you want, everything you deserve." They remarried on a crisp autumn day, 2 years after their divorce was finalized. 18 months after Garrison had seen Brielle pregnant at the farmer's market. Lyric, now a toddler with her mother's smile and her father's stubborn streak, was the flower girl, more interested in eating the petals than dropping them. Garrison's vows spoke of second chances and choosing love over fear. Brielle's vows spoke of forgiveness and the courage to trust again. There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering of family and friends. Their story became one Brielle would eventually share with Lyric as she grew older, age-appropriate versions that carried important lessons. Love isn't always enough. Love needs to be supported by action, communication, respect, and shared priorities. Garrison had loved Brielle even when he pushed her away, but love without action is just a feeling that fades. People can change, but only if they choose to do the work. Garrison's transformation wasn't magic. It was therapy, self-reflection, consistent effort, and the humbling realization of what he'd lost. Change is possible, but it requires genuine commitment. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Brielle forgave Garrison, but she didn't pretend their painful history hadn't happened. She used it as a foundation for better communication, clearer boundaries, and realistic expectations. You teach people how to treat you. When Brielle chose to divorce Garrison rather than accept his treatment of her and their unborn child, she established that she wouldn't tolerate being undervalued. That self-respect ultimately made their reconciliation possible on healthier terms. Family isn't just about biology. The support system Brielle built, her mother, Kendra, her teaching community, was just as important as Garrison stepping up. It takes a village, and you get to choose your village. Consequences are teachers. Garrison had to live with the consequences of his choices, losing Brielle, missing the pregnancy, nearly missing Lyric's birth. Those consequences taught him in ways words never could have. Second chances are gifts, not guarantees. Brielle didn't owe Garrison another chance. She gave it because she saw genuine change and was willing to risk her heart again. But she went in with eyes open, boundaries clear. Your children are watching. As Lyric grew, she would see her parents communicate through disagreements, apologize when they messed up, prioritize their relationship, and choose each other even when it was hard. That would teach her more about healthy love than any words could. 5 years after their remarriage, Garrison and Brielle sat on the porch of the house they'd bought together. In a neighborhood they'd chosen together, diverse, close to good schools, filled with families of all kinds. Lyric, now 7, was inside with her little brother Mason, reading him a story with the dramatic flair she'd inherited from her mother. Their daughter was artistic like Brielle, stubborn like both of them, and had Garrison completely wrapped around her little finger. "Do you ever think about that day at the farmer's market?" Garrison asked, his hand finding Brielle's. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I was so angry when I saw you. I was devastated," he said, "seeing you pregnant, realizing what I'd thrown away, knowing I'd abandoned you during the hardest months. But we made it here," Brielle said, squeezing his hand. "It wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but we made it. I'm grateful every day that you gave me another chance, that you let me be Lyric's father, that you trusted me with your heart again." Brielle leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm grateful you did the work to become someone worthy of that trust. The Garrison I divorced wouldn't have been capable of this life. But the man you chose to become, he's everything I ever hoped for." Inside, they heard Lyric's voice, and they lived happily ever after because they talked about their feelings and went to therapy. Both Garrison and Brielle burst out laughing. Their daughter had definitely been paying attention to their story. "That's not how that story goes," Mason protested. "It's how all stories should go," Lyric insisted with 7-year-old certainty. "Daddy says the best thing he ever did was go to therapy and learn to talk about his feelings instead of hiding in his work." Garrison groaned. "She quotes me too much." "Nope," Brielle said, grinning. "Just enough. Come on, let's go tuck in our therapized children." As they walked inside together, Garrison pulled Brielle close. "I love our life, even the messy parts," she teased. "Especially the messy parts," he said seriously. "They taught me what matters. You, Lyric, Mason, you're what matters. Everything else is just noise." And as they tucked their children into bed, reading stories and giving kisses, Brielle marveled at the journey they'd taken. From the painful ending of their first marriage to the beautiful complexity of their second chance. They'd learned that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice made daily, in big moments and small. Sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones that start perfectly. Sometimes they're the ones that break and then are rebuilt with intention, honesty, and the courage to try again. So, here's my question for you, and I really want you to answer this in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between giving someone a second chance or protecting your peace? What did you choose, and do you regret it? Your story matters. Share it below. And while you're in the comments, tell me, what was the moment in this story that hit you the hardest? Was it when Garrison saw her pregnant? When he missed the anniversary? When he held Lyric for the first time? I want to know what landed for you. If you loved this story, smash that like button, subscribe for more real-life stories that'll make you feel everything, and share this with someone who believes in second chances, or someone who needs to hear that it's okay not to give one. Thank you for being part of this community. Your support means everything. I'll see you in the next one. Keep choosing love, keep choosing growth, and keep choosing yourself.